Well, let's look at this more closely now. Kadir Sayıcı is a managing partner at an accountancy firm here in Istanbul. He's also part of the Turkish Association for Foreign Investors. Thank you very much for joining us on Money Talks. Let's just begin with what you see as the greatest challenge for Turkey's economy going forward after this weekend's events.
The main reason for me to be here is, first of all, to just give a brief about our interview, which we did to check the foreign investors' failure and success in Turkey. What are the reasons behind the success and what are the reasons behind the failure? So all our research, etc., was regarding with this issue, but this weekend now changed almost everything about the Turkey's vision. But of course, at the first stage, everybody was very, as a result of the things happened, the COUP, people were a bit pessimistic. But then, after the government started to take control, then they started to also be optimistic. And many of our foreign investor friends, they are all called us and they said they are with Turkey and they want to continue their investment in Turkey. But of course, during this, our all works, our study, we try to understand the factors which are affecting the investment in Turkey. And when we asked people what are the main drives to take you to Turkey for investment, and what are the negative effects to make investment in Turkey, we found as a negative one the political instability. Unfortunately, of course, we tried to overpass these instabilities by our powerful young demand, also our geographical position, and also our increasing disposable incomes. All these are affected thinking of the foreign investors to come Turkey as a positively. But
let me ask you about the government's measures in the light of what happened. Can you tell us a little bit about what the government is doing to mitigate what has happened over the weekend? The central bank, the finance ministry, and so on?
Yeah, in reality, they are all trying to give trust to the market, of course. This is the main issue. If the people will not trust you and your country, they will not come to make any investment in your country. Therefore, you have to, first of all, convince people that there is no problem, everything is settled down, and the economy is going as it is before. So this kind of measures, of course, will affect the people thinking, and we wish this will be in a positive way, of course. So the central bank's decision to support to the market will be a good start to make everything normalize. Therefore, the government is, of course, trying to their best to make the market to turn its normal conditions. But as I said, this is not a few days issue. Of course, all the foreign investors will start to see the market try to understand what will going on the market, and then they will change their decide. Usually the main subject of our conversation here is a long-term investment, and long-term capital investment cannot change their mind in one day. This is not just money flows. So, of course, they will try to understand what is going on to the market, and then they may change their things.
Kadir Sayıcı, thank you very much for your analysis from Istanbul. Well, to look a little closer at this now, I'm joined by Mike Ingram. He's the market analyst at BGC Partners in London. Mike, just give us your perspective from London and the more international perspective on what's going on here in Turkey.
Well, if you look at the performance of risk assets this year, emerging market debt and equity has done quite well, has high yield. And I think to some extent the events in Turkey over the last 48 hours have prompted some to take some of that money off the table. You have had some weakness in broader emerging markets, but of course that has been centred on Turkish assets. As you mentioned, the Istanbul Stock Exchange is down, the currency remains under pressure, and also Turkish bonds have been sold off. I think ultimately the international environment, the ultra-low yield environment that we're seeing out of Bank of Japan, US Fed, the ECB in Europe, is going to keep that reach for yield dynamic in place and just brought support to emerging market assets. But I think, you know, you have got some idiosyncratic elements in play within Turkey. I think one of the things that's vitally important for international investors is to understand how robust the institutions within Turkey are. So do we still have an independent central bank? Do we have a functioning judiciary? Do we have transparency within the finance ministry? And at the moment, you know, given the events, given the arrests, given the investigations, I think investors are actually erring on the side of caution and actually selling the market.
Right, so it's not just what happened over the weekend, it is the subsequent actions, the arrests and so on, that the international investors are looking at.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've clearly had sporadic attacks on the central bank, and I think there is a worry that so many in the finance ministry are now under investigation. You know, obviously, international investors would like to see a satisfactory conclusion for that. I think that's in everybody's interest, including the population of Turkey, the finance ministry. By the same token, you know, we need to know that there is the rule of law. It's one of, you know, for instance, that's been one of the drawbacks of investing in the Russian market. We can say that the market looks cheap, but investors want to know what legal entitlement they have to those assets if they go in and invest in them. So I think these broader questions have been in place for a while. I think it's kept the market cheaper than it otherwise would have been. And I think the events over the last 48 hours or so have brought that sharply into focus.
Okay, Mike Ingrams, thank you very much for your analysis from London.